So we are going to be our third week into chapter 2 of Romans. So we spent about 4 hours so far looking at chapter 2 of Romans. We'll try to end chapter 2 tonight and going into chapter 3 next Sabbath. But in chapter 2, we have learned Paul has said a mouthful in chapter 2 of Romans. And Paul pretty much, in what we have looked at so far in chapter 2, Paul has pretty much um, done away with any kind of accusation that anybody may have make against him, saying that Paul taught against the law of God, or that Paul uh, did not do the things that he did before his, what we say conversion uh, on the road to, wow, Damascus. So let's pick up at verse number 17. Says, Behold, thou art called a Jew, and restest in the law, and makest thy boast of God, and knowest his will. That word will means things that please him, or what pleases him, and approvest the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law, and art confident that thyself art a guide of the blind, a light of them that are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, which has the form of knowledge and of the truth of the law. Here's, this truth and the law coming together again. Verse 21 says, Thou therefore which teachest another, teachest thou not thyself? Thou that preachest a man should not steal, dost thou steal? So what we're going to get into now is Paul is going to ask some questions in the next couple of verses that cause these hearers and these readers today to, you pretty much have to take a self-examination. You now have to look inside of you, because let's read 21 again. You that teach others, do you not teach yourself? You that preach a man should not steal, do you steal? So look at the word steal, because it's important to get some definitions of some words in our mind as we look through this tonight. This word steal is the Strong's number 2813. It is the word klepto. So anybody, yes sir,
Where we get the word kleptomaniac?
where we get the word kleptomaniac from. And it means, of course, to steal. It means to take by stealth. So we need to understand this definition also, along with just the plain fact the word means to steal, but it means to kind of take it stealthily. So no one really knows that you're stealing. The Greek equivalent is the Hebrew equivalent is Strong's number 1589. This word means to steal, to rob, to sweep away. But it indicates to wrongfully taking objects. So you're taking things, let's remember this, you're taking things that do not belong to you. That's what stealing is. Someone walks in here, Art, and they say, oh, I don't have one of these at home. And then they shove it in their pocket hole and they walk out the door. What have they done? They stole it. It didn't belong to them. So let's keep that definition also in our minds as we walk through a couple of these scriptures tonight. So he asks pretty much, you that say that a man shouldn't take what belongs to you, do you take what doesn't belong to you?
Sometimes that's not a material thing that they steal or we steal or
Right.
anybody steals. We can steal a lot of different things. And that's the bad thing.
That's the bad thing. And so kind of what Art is hinting at is kind of the direction we're going to go. is not so much stealing physical objects that don't belong to you, but stealing some other things that don't belong to you. And so in this next verse is where we really get to the meat of this whole thing as far as stealing things that don't belong to you. Because Paul asks a very powerful question in verse 22. He says, "Thou that sayest a man should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery?" This word used here for adultery is Strong's number 3431. And it means an adulterer.
What is the word?
I didn't write the word down.
Okay.
It means an adulterer, to commit adultery. Its root, or it is from the Strong's word 3432. And that word means an adulterer. But now here is the other meaning to the root of this word that Paul is asking when he asks, do you commit adultery? This word also speaks of one who is faithless toward God. So that is the Greek definition there. Because what does Yeshua say when he's talking about adultery? And we talked about this before, how people say that he came to lighten our load, Paul, and make everything a little bit more easier. He says, so this is how he lightens it up. He changes it from if a man just sleeps with a woman that's not his wife, that he's an adulterer. But he lightens that up to where now if you just think about it, if you desire, if you lust after that woman in your heart or in your mind, then you are now guilty of adultery. So let's even keep what he says in mind as we look at what Paul is asking tonight. Now, the Hebrew word for this word adultery is Strong's number 5003. And of course, it means to commit adultery, but it's also used, it's used in the physical act, but oftentimes it is used of spiritual adultery as well. And it's also a word used to indicate idolatry. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 57. We're going to get kind of indication here.
57.
Isaiah 57. Let's begin at verse 1. We're going to see an example of where this word is used. It says, "The righteous perisheth, and no man layeth it to heart. And merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. He shall enter into peace, they shall rest in their beds, each one walking in his uprightness. But draw near hither, ye sons of the sorcerers, the seed of adulterer, and the whore, against whom do you sport yourselves, against whom you make ye a wide mouth, and draw out the tongue? Are ye not children of transgression, a seed of falsehood, inflaming yourselves with idols under every green tree, slaying the children in the valleys under the cliffs of the rocks?" So we see here is an example of what he's talking about is not a physical adultery, but God is addressing a spiritual adultery. But if you want to look at probably one of the best examples that we can find about it illustrates spiritual adultery. It's a very short book. It's called the Book of Hosea. Now, all through the Hebrew Scriptures, this is addressed over and over again. But in Hosea, it's really nailed down. An example is going to be Hosea chapter 2. And we'll start at verse 2 says, plead with your mother. Plead, for she is not my wife. This is Yahweh God speaking. Neither am I her husband. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts. Then verse 4 says, for they be the children, speaking of her offspring, for they be the children of whoredoms. And then let's go to verse 11, because he's going to now tell us what some of her adulteries and her whoredoms are. In verse 11, he says, I will cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feast. And then verse 13, and I will visit upon her the days of Balaam, wherein she burned incense to them, and she decked herself with her earrings and her jewels, and she went after her lovers and forgot me, saith the Lord. So here's an example. But I want you to look here, okay, because this is a good place to take somebody that's going to say that the Sabbath has been done away with, all the feasts are done away with, and everything. And we pointed this out months ago, probably last summer, summer before. And let's see what, because he does say that he's going to end some Sabbaths. He's going to end some feast days. But if we look at it, it says, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. So whose Sabbaths, new moons, and feast days did he say he's going to end? Her, yeah, the whores, yes. That is the days that he says that he is going to end. Hers, not his, but hers. And then verse 13 tells us who she was. Let's say it this way, because we've not said this in months. But verse 13 tells you who she was whoring around with. Balaam. So let's go to 1 Kings chapter 18. Because in 1 Kings 18, here again, the subject matter of Israel's unfaithfulness to Yahweh, their unfaithfulness to God, is addressed. And Elijah addresses it, especially in verse 21. And it says, Elijah came unto all the people and said, how long halt ye between two opinions? If, let's just say it this way, if Yahweh be Elohim, God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. And here is another sad thing. It says, and the people answered him not a word. So then he goes on and tells them, let's straighten this out now. And he tells them, you call on the name of your gods, your Elohim, and I'll call on the name of Yahweh. And he says, and the Elohim that answer by fire, let him be Elohim. And all the people answered and said, that sounds good to me. That sounds good to us. Because I think these people thought that the ones they were already serving was the one that was going to answer by fire. But now this Hebrew word 5003 that means adultery, its root is from 5005, and it describes the act of the unfaithfulness of one's spouse. So you're being unfaithful to your spouse. And Hosea, he likens Israel and Judah to his what? Because he says, she's not my wife, and I'm not her husband. And pretty much told them, and I'm not going to be your father until you put away your adulterous and whoredoms away from you. Pretty much until you make up your mind. This is what Elijah is addressing here in 1 Kings. When are you going to make up your mind? How often are you going to continue to jump from the true God to the false God? Because I think we have a habit sometimes as human beings. A lot of times we're going to be on the side that's winning. We want to be on the side that's going to benefit us the most.
Yep.
We see that, during the election cycles. What are people wanting to hear from politicians? What is he going to give me? Yeah, money. Am I still going to get to pull out my plastic card that, all these workers have put money on it for me? Well, a lot of times I sit at home, and, sometimes I know there are some that actually need the help. But from the business I was in before, I know there's a lot of people that are taking advantage of the help, that are more than able to get out and work, but they have what a lot of people have a lot of times. They have a lackawanna, and that could be a very fatal disease for me and for you when somebody else has got lackawanna. Because if they got lackawanna, that pretty much means they want you to go to work and work till you're 85, so they can sit at home and drive their Mercedes and their BMW and get their piercings and tattoos. That's what I saw most of the time from their alcohol and maybe a little, so they can go to the doctor and get some help. But so this is where they were at. They thought we got more liberty. Well, we got more liberty over here, Paul, if we stay with Baal than we do over here, because this one that brought us out of Egypt, this one that's healed us, this one that provided for us, this one that has loved us, he's wanting us to do some particular things. And he told us if we would, that he'd continue to take care of us.
It is quite poignant that he equates that with adultery, and that's what you're finding.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you go into these feasts of these pagans, and you go into their modes of worship, they are basically surrounded by drunken orgies.
Mm-hmm.
And
Repetitively.
Mm-hmm. Even today.
Yeah.
Not just then, but bring that forward today. I mean, let's look, if we want to, look at spring break. Mardi Gras. That will be coming up in the next week or two.
Oh, yeah.
What is that all about?
Drinking.
Drinking, getting drunk. Yeah.
Oh, because you're gonna have to obey for the next 40 days.
And that is,
You have to
And
They're-
besides the Catholic
for 40
feast,
days.
but now they're not going to admit, and the Catholic Church surely isn't going to tell you that that is Baal worship. That is exactly what that is. But no, they're not going to tell you that. We were down there in April of this past year, and Mardi Gras was started in Mobile, Alabama, is where it come out of. It made its way to Louisiana. But they're taking us I forgot where they were taking us. But even from February to April, there were still beads thrown up in trees and stuff that they hadn't gotten down yet from all of the celebration. And then that's that time that the guy that originated it, I guess. All these women dress in black and go to his grave. It's in a historic cemetery, and they sit and scream and cry and mourn. And last year the police had to come run them out because there were so many that the ground was starting to cave in under them, and they were desecrating this cemetery. And then they eat the king cake, I believe is what they call it.
Looking for the
And
baby.
find the baby.
That
Find
yeah,
the baby.
that is Baal worship, is what that is.
What did they say it was?
What?
The king cake, what is it?
Oh,
It's
the
got the-
king cake, and you find the baby that's in the cake, and then you
You're
consider
supposed
the
to have
king.
luck or something if you're
Have
the
a-
one that finds the piece of it.
Yeah, but no, aren't you crowned king?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so the child is the offering.
God don't like
Wow.
what's going on down there because look what
They
he
just
done.
had tornadoes again.
Yep.
I guess the hurricane wasn't enough to wake them up. They had to do a little bit more.
Some tornadoes.
But see, he's saying, keep in mind too, now he's gone from taking what don't belong to you. And now he's saying, are you guilty? You that say you shouldn't, let's put it this way. You who say that you shouldn't cheat on God or Yahweh, are you cheating? You that say you shouldn't take things that don't belong to you, are you taking things that don't belong to you? You that say you're not supposed to cheat, are you cheating? So these questions here should cause some self, searching. Search cause you to search the heart of yourself. And let's go on as we continue with this thought here. He says, "Thou that abhorrest idols."
Okay, back to Romans.
You're at Romans
22.
verse 22.
Next part.
End of that verse. It says, "You that abhorrest idols, dost thou commit sacrilege?" This word abhorrest is the Strong's word 948. It means to render foul, to stink. It means to turn oneself away from a stench. It is from the Strong's word 947. And that word means that which is an abomination to God. The Hebrew equivalent is Strong's word 1602. It means to loathe, to cast away, to reject as loathsome, or to have an aversion for. So if we go to Leviticus chapter 20, which I think if you are caught up, you have already read Leviticus chapter 20. And we're going to see what Yahweh God is talking about, things that we should abhor. Leviticus 20 and verse 22 says, "Ye shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my judgments, and do them, that in the land where I bring you to dwell therein will not spew you out. And you shall not walk in the manners of the nation which I cast out before you. For they committed all these things, and therefore I abhorred them." Pretty much they were a stink to me. They were a stench to me. I turned myself away from them. But I have said unto you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it unto you to possess it, a land that floweth milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, which have separated you from other people. So here he is telling us how he felt about these people. If you read the first of Leviticus 20, you're going to see these things that he's telling them not to do because they were, this is what the things they did is what caused him to turn away from their stench. Because it was a foul smell to him. These people were a foul smell because of what they were doing. Now, there are some today that will say that it doesn't matter what you do. You can do whatever you want to do. And that God is still going to you can still be saved. You can still be all right. But Leviticus, God says that's not so. If you do these things that these people that I drove out before you did, you're going to be a stench to me just like they are. But he says what? He goes, I separated you. That word separate means I sanctified you. It means I made you I made you a holy people. So what does he say over and over to do? He says to them, one place in Leviticus, he said, I think it's Leviticus 11, he says, be ye holy, for I am holy. Do you know what he's talking about in Leviticus 11 when he tells them to be holy?
Foods.
Foods. So what about eating clean?
Be holy, eat clean.
Be holy, eat clean.
That's a t-shirt.
Yeah, we'll make that a t-shirt.
Start typing that
I'm gonna give me a can of Spam on mine
up. With a red circle.
with a
around
red
it.
circle, maybe with a piece of Spam and a skillet, you know.
Pink
'cause-
chicken.
Yeah, pink chicken. That's the best way to eat Spam, I guess, fried. But he's talking to them about the dietary laws. That one thing that the churchianity says today, that he sanctified all of those things that he declared clean. Okay, he suddenly somehow God magically, Paul, those things he created to eat poo, he said is now clean. Go ahead and eat that. You take in that disease.
Go
Because-
ask your heart doctor what he thinks.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, he'll tell you the truth. He'll tell you to quit eating. If you got blood pressure, cholesterol problems, or heart issues, he's going to tell you, lay off of that pork. And you know what else we're not supposed to eat? Fat.
Yeah, we read that not so long ago.
Don't eat the fat.
The animal fat.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
supposed to be burned up.
Because the animal fat holds on to those disease and stuff. So
Toxin.
you like your steaks with the gristle, you like to chew on that
Chew on
gristle.
that.
Can I eat pork rinds?
No.
Herb, eat all the pork rinds you want. Those that's good fried fat. So you can eat all
You
them.
just be a stench in God's nose.
Just eat them that pink chicken deep
Say your
fried.
blessing.
You see, yeah. Say a blessing and it'll be all right.
But it's purified by fire, though. You smoke that stuff. Isn't it made holy by the fire?
Listen. Yes, indeed.
Sounds just like I do.
Oh, boy.
Sounds like let's go to Leviticus 26.
Not there yet.
Verse 14 says, but if you will not hearken to me and will not do all these commandments, and if ye shall despise my statutes, or if you so abhor my judgments, so that you will not do all my commandments, but you will break my covenant, I will also do this unto you. I will even appoint over you terror, consumption, and the burning ague that shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart, and ye shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it.
Ew.
So here again, he's talking about despising and abhorring. And here he's saying pretty much the questions that Paul is asking, he's giving the answer to. But here again, we're looking at it not from just a physical theft, not just from a physical adultery, but a spiritual adultery. And what happens when a person commits a physical adultery, when they physically cheat on their spouse? What have they done? They've broken the vows they said they took, and they stood there and said, I'll love you forever. I'll take care of you when you're sick. I'll provide for you until something better comes around or something more attractive gets my attention. And then I'm going to scoot over there. Well, what are you? You're a covenant breaker.
Stole something that didn't belong to you either.
Stole something that didn't belong to you. Guess what? That's a good point. When you look at that other woman or other man, they don't belong to you. And
And in Ephesians it says you are not your own.
you've been bought with the price.
Yeah. And so you, in your covenant with your wife, you belong to her. So you've stolen from her when you give yourself to someone else.
Absolutely.
So you stole twice.
And then Leviticus 26 and then verse 30, another scripture to kind of drive this home. He says, and I will destroy your high places. So they've already stepped out of covenant. They're already, and these are things he will do if they do this. But he's saying if you commit adultery, if you commit whoredoms, if you whore around on me, if you cheat on me, then I will destroy your high places. And I will cut down your images, and I will cast your carcass upon the carcasses of your idols, and my soul shall abhor you. Pretty much, if you cheat on me, this is what we need to drive home. God's saying, if you cheat on me, then I'm going to turn my back on you because you do what? You stink. Anybody like to be around me that stinks? For 3 years of high school, I sat by a girl every year that stunk. Did not know what deodorant and soap was for. She was a foul-smelling individual to the point that her best friend even put deodorant and soap in her locker one day. And she still didn't get the hint. She still smelled bad. And I had to sit by her for 3 years of school. Burned in my mind. I still remember her name. I can still see her face.
Hopefully she's done.
I can still smell the smell when I think about it.
I bet you never married.
She did marry.
She did.
She
Did she
got
finally
married.
figure out what soap was for? Or?
I don't
He
know.
stinks as bad as she
He
does.
does.
He may.
I hope she learned something.
Well, that's it though. Churchianity today hasn't learned anything. We were talking about it earlier. Many of these people, these pioneers that started many of these different denominations, knew these things. They knew that the things that we're learning about and we're walking in now were important. They knew that they had not been ended at the cross. But somewhere along the way, something else got somebody's attention, and we might as well, let's just, the best answer would be money. We can draw a bigger crowd if we can say you can continue to keep your adultery, because you can steal things that don't belong to you, because that's what they did. They stole things that did not belong to them, and then my wife don't like this word, but tonight's a good night to say it. It's in the Bible. Then they hoard around on God. And so Paul's asking the question, do you that abhor idols, are you guilty? Do you commit sacrilege? Now, this word idols is Strong's word 1497. And it means a form, an appearance, an image, or representation, whether corporal or imaginary, used for a statue of a man, or even for a concept of the mind. It is an imaginary deity. The word stands for an idol or an image set up to be worshipped as a god. So in Exodus, God tells Israel that you are not to do not worship any other gods before me. So this before me means in the Hebrew, in my face. So you're not to worship any other gods in my face. So now what we've done is we've taken that and we've hid it. And we've used the excuse that that's not what it means to me. And so because we have that excuse, Paul, we can continue to commit the act of adultery. Because even though the scriptures say what adultery is, and that we can look all through the scriptures that Paul and Peter and James and John and Jesus and all of them would have read, where where God always often gives the admonishment, do not do these things. If you do these things, these are going to be the repercussions for messing around and cheating on me. If you do these things, this is what Paul and all of them would have been very familiar with. But now we say, well, they may have known that, but that's okay for them. But that don't mean that to me. And to me, when you say that's not what it means to me, you're saying that God really doesn't know what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When he says, don't do it, you're saying, well, he couldn't have been talking about that. Because I'm taking something that doesn't belong to me, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to cheat on him. And the fact is that church ain't today is blatantly not hiding the fact.
Well,
That-
that's like, I'm sorry. It's like saying, okay, well, I'm going to cheat on you, but you won't care.
Right, it's okay. I've got permission. But now let's use this as an
But they're
illustration.
doing what's right in their own eye,
Right?
not consulting God. Seems that happened in a garden somewhere.
Right. Right. I think them people got kicked out, didn't they?
They might have got an eviction
God says to
notice.
them, you're not living in my house if you don't play by my rules. But now let's get this a bit further. Usually, and anybody watch TV besides me? Anybody got
Too
TV?
much of it.
If you ever watched a show, and let's say that husband is going to go out with some friends, and all of his friends are unmarried, and so they're going to go to a club or they're going to go somewhere to have a good time. A lot of things the husband will do is what?
Take
Ring
off
on.
his ring.
Takes his ring off. That way that the woman doesn't know that he's married, and that he's got a wife that he's already spoken for. So the scriptures tell us that the Sabbath is what? Holy. But God also says, I'm giving you the Sabbath as a sign, as part of a covenant marker between me and you. So pretty much he says, if you keep the Sabbath, that's your wedding band. The Sabbath says, you're married to me.
I got an acquaintance, or used to have an acquaintance, that he wouldn't wear a wedding ring. And his excuse was that his wife is married, but he's not.
What?
All right.
She wears the ring because she's married, but he's not. He's
Right.
busy cheating all the time.
Okay.
Evidently.
But the Sabbath is that wedding band that shows that you're married to Yahweh, that you're married to God, that you're in a relationship, And what is one of the first things that Churchianity says is not for us today?
The Sabbath.
Sabbath.
The church says, I'm not married. So the church says, I've taken off my wedding band so that nobody knows that I'm married. And God says, pretty much, even in Hosea and Jeremiah, he says, I'm giving you a what?
Divorce.
A divorce. If you don't want to be married to me, you don't have to be married to me. I'm going to divorce you until you begin to realize you had it good and didn't know it. Hosea says, I'm going to woo you. I'm going to draw you back out into the wilderness, and I'm going to woo you back until you fall in love with me all over again. But where Churchianity has made the mistake is that they took the wedding band off, and you and I and anybody who studies these scriptures cannot help but admit the fact that the majority of Christianity is playing the adulterer. Because they have took off the only reason that you would take off your ring when you're out where you know you shouldn't really be out is because in your heart you've already got it made up in your mind that you're going to do some cheating.
And when you look at that ring, it's a reminder of who you really are.
Absolutely. And the ring not only tells you who you are, but the ring tells anybody else that may be interested in you who you are. It's a good indicator that you're already spoken for. So when the church took off the wedding band, then that one that's out there that is trying to get their attention says, well, you've already admitted the fact that you're not connected to him. So why don't you come on over here? Because I've got some good stuff for you. And so that's where we're at today. And Paul, in one of his letters, says, and such were some of you.
1 Corinthians.
So we can't be in here tonight and say, oh, look at those people cheating on God. Shame on them. Because maybe with the exception of one, we all were at one time cheaters.
That's right.
We all at one time were whoring around on God. We were all, but at the same time, we were there spiritually and heard the question that Elijah asked, how long are you going to halt between two opinions? How long are you going to go back and forth, back and forth? You need to make a decision today. Let him that answers by fire be God. And so that's why we're here on this Sabbath tonight, because he woke us up and he called us out into the wilderness and wooed us until we said, you know what, I want to be married to you. Just like the song that we sang earlier, teach me your ways. That's what we're here for, is to teach, for him to teach us his ways. We have been taught for years man's ways of how man says to do it. Man says this is what you do if you're in love with the Creator, if you're in love with Yeshua. This is what you're going to do. But the book plainly says a lot of that stuff we were told we're going to do, the book doesn't indicate that that's what we're going to do. People in just 2 months are going to come together on a sunrise service, and they're going to worship, and they're going to sing, and they're going to cry, and they're going to be all sad because man says this is when he was crucified. This is when he resurrected. But guess what? It's not. It is They say, we're going to celebrate Easter. They don't even realize what they're saying because they don't know. They're saying, when they say that, they're saying, we're going to celebrate Ishtar.
Yeah.
We're going for Ishtar Sunday.
Thanks.
And that because they don't know. So they're still out there. Still, and God is still wanting to draw them into Him. But they don't know.
But that's so slip in here some history. In 1 Corinthians, that whole book is Paul's message to former Gentiles on the subject of Passover and unleavened bread. And that's where that verse is, and such were some of you, the pagans. Well, we're talking about adultery and Venus, another name, or Ishtar or Easter, another name is Venus or Aphrodite. In Corinth, at the time Paul wrote his message, the temple of Venus had 1,000 whores in it to take care of the business.
All for money.
It's for money.
And so that is what that's all about. It's drunken orgies. And it is Easter Day has to do with her lover, Adonis, who was killed by Mars, a rival. And she went to Hades to request him come back out. Well, the day he comes back out is Easter Day.
Yep.
It's his resurrection.
Yep.
And the people at that temple knew that.
Yes.
And such were some of you, they knew it.
Yeah.
And Paul was not preaching Easter. There's no way.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But, even more closer to us is this Valentine's Day, which, you sing the person you love some chocolates, some little bit of flowers, and nice little card, got a heart on it. And here again, that's got nothing to do with loving your man or your woman. That was when they got a little bucket, and all the virgins in town put their name in the bucket, and all the guys come around and drew a name out. Whatever name they drew, went home, and that virgin was his for the day.
No longer a virgin.
Yeah. But it was in the worship, not of God, but of a false god. And that goes back to that little Cupid. Hallie told me today, she went to the bank, she goes, I'll let you know if that Cupid's still there. She says she didn't go in though, so she's not sure. But Lana saw it Monday or Tuesday or something. They're at the drive-through. But all right, so we got Paul asking the question, do you take things that don't belong to you? Are you committing adultery? Are you committing spiritual adultery? He says, you that abhor idols or things that you say are stinks to you, do you commit sacrilege? The sacrilege is the word 24:16. And it means to commit sacrilege, or it means a person who is sacrilegious. It also means to commit ungodly deeds. But now here, the word that it's from is 24:17. And its root word means a robber of a temple. A robber of a temple. So here again, this just goes back into the spiritual aspect of it. You're stealing things that don't belong to you. You're robbing things out of this temple that's not yours, and you're bringing it out. And this is something that a lot of people have done. This is what a lot of the denominations and groups have done, and we all know this. But let's go to Daniel chapter 5. Because this right here, this robber of temples, this taking things that don't belong to you, these questions that Paul is asking, we've already said it, but you've got this mentality today of that's not what it means to me. So we've taken things that don't belong to us. We've been caught cheating, and so this just goes right along with it, because these things all don't belong to us, but they don't belong to God. But when you begin to substitute the things that belong to God and make them what you want them to be, does that statement make sense? Or is that just in my head? But it's God says Passover belongs to me, and you say no, Easter. Resurrection happened on Easter. God says Sukkot belongs to me, and you say no, Christmas is what we're going to celebrate. Daniel chapter 5, beginning at verse 1. It says, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar's wine, he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God and that was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and all of his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth the finger of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees were smote one against another. But do we see here that they took the vessels that were in the temple, and they said, we're going to, these things that were separated, that were sanctified, that were made holy for the service of God, and they said, we're going to take these things and we're now going to use them for our purpose. Did everybody see that? How did God feel about that?
Wasn't pleased.
He wasn't pleased at all. You're taking my stuff. You've went in, you've robbed my temple, and now you're taking my stuff and using it to please you, to do what you want to do with it. And they were using his things, and it says, and they worshiped the gods of gold and of silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone. So they're taking God's things and they're worshiping other gods with it. Is that not what we used to do? See, I could say, is that not what the church does? But I chose to say, is that not what we used to do? Because here again, and such were some of you. And so what we've got to understand here, and I keep saying this, is Paul is asking these questions to see where these people's heart really lies. Are you really as in love with him as you say you are? Or are you just like at the beginning of chapter 2, does Paul not say and make the statement, you who judge, or you are just as guilty of the one that you're judging? And so he's kind of saying the same thing over again, asking the questions. Are you doing these things? But because he done that, God told him that your time has run out. You're going to lose your kingdom. And I believe that he died that same night from doing those things, from being a temple robber. So are we making sense tonight, or are we muddying the waters?
That makes sense to us. We're the choir.
You're the choir. Verse 23. Thou that makest thy boast of the law. So this word boast means pretty much vaunt, to brag. You know, I've got the law, I've got the covenant, I'm better than you are. He says, you that do that through breaking the law, dishonorest thou God. This word breaking is Strong's word 3847. It means to transgress, a transgression or a violation of the law. The root word is 3845, and it means to fall from or lose one's station or position by transgression. Hebrew equivalent to this word is Strong's word 7846. It means a defection, a deviation, a revolt. It refers to Yahweh's people who are turning against him and his laws. It speaks of people who are deviating from what is pleasing to him.
The beginning there of 23, thou makest thy boast, doesn't that harken back to verse 17, where it's the Jews that are boasting that they are God's people?
Yeah, they're the ones that's got the covenant, they've got the law, they're the ones that God handpicked out. You know, he loves me more than he loves you. Kind of, you know, siblings.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you're part of the family, but I'm dad's favorite.
Yeah.
You know, I was the firstborn, so I've got a little bit more.
Are you sure you were born into this family?
Yeah, yeah. You know, I've told Hallie before. You know, you were adopted, just to aggravate her. So this is pretty much the same thing. Well, she wasn't adopted, but she don't have to know that. But this is the same scenario going on here. Is hi there. Is there's nothing.
He's guilty.
They say, you know, nah, you're adopted, you're second best, whatever, you know. So yeah, it goes back to that. We're better than you are. And then Paul asked them this question: you who do that, what exactly are you doing? And he's talking about that breaking means to swerve. It also means to fall away. So I got Hosea chapter 5.
What verse?
Verse number 2. What are you reading out of? New King James?
King James. And the revolters are profound to make slaughter, though I have been a rebuker of them all.
Okay, that revolter, this is the word used that Paul is using here for breaking, the same word in the Hebrew, and it means to swerve or to rebel against the deeds. It also means to fall away. It speaks of a falling away. 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3. Somebody got it?
Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition.
Well, there you go. So we've got what Paul is saying here. He's asking a question. You that boast pretty much that you are the firstborn, that you're the chosen ones, you're handpicked. You boast of the law through falling away from it. for falling away from the law. He says, do you dishonor God? And so we see here, now when you read the Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and 3, and you go to Baptist or Church of Christ or Pentecostal or evangelical type of church, and they read that and they talk about a falling away. What falling away are they talking about?
Church doctrine.
Church doctrine. They're talking about this man of sin won't be revealed until our church gets smaller. And people leave the Church of Christ, or they leave the Baptist, or leave the Pentecostals. They're talking about their church doctrine. But the scriptures all tell us that that's not what Paul is talking about. He is talking about a falling away from the things of God. Do we see that?
Yes.
It's very evident that we are living in a time where man has fallen away from the things of God. Not just your church down the road, but human beings in general have fallen away from the things of God. I mean, watch the news. A few weeks ago, there was on Facebook, there was a picture, I guess it was a woman. Look like she had ball bearings implanted in her head. Did you see that?
Is that the one you showed me?
Might have been. So she had these ball bearings implanted where she had ripples in her skull, and she had piercings all in her ears, in her nose, in her lips, in her throat, in her eyelids, and all tatted up. And you know what it said? I can't get a job because you're a bigot. I ain't no bigot.
Well, if anybody read the article about Lady Gaga and what was really going on behind the scenes in the halftime show,
Oh,
that in itself would scare you to death.
Yeah. So you can see by just that image that man has fallen away from the things of God. So this is what he's saying. You that boast about the law, do you through your falling away, through your falling away. So even there was a falling away from this law. He says, you dishonors God. This word dishonors means to treat without honor, to treat with indignity. It means to make of low character or reputation, or to treat shamefully. So we get from verse 23 what Paul is saying, or asking the question, because of your falling away from the things that please God, from God's law, what he's asking the question is, are you treating God shamefully? Are you making his character, giving him a low character? Are you ruining his reputation? And that's a good question. So let's click the TV on again. Let's watch the news. And out of all the religions, which is the most despised religion in the world today? Christianity. Christianity. Why? Because we have done this very thing that Paul's asking the question of. And we could say churchianity today, but Christianity comes out a whole lot better right now. You got to concentrate on saying churchianity. But that's what they've done. They fell away from the things of God, so now they've made God of low character. If you can't do pretty much what God requires you to do, then you're pretty much saying God's not as powerful as he says he is. Did not Moses say this to God one time when God said, Moses, get out of the way? When these Israelites had slipped away into paganism, broken the law, not even 2 months out,
40 days.
and God says, get out of the way. I'm going to destroy them. And Moses asked God the question, if you do that, what kind of reputation are you going to have among all these nations? Because they're going to say that you couldn't even keep these people that you brought out. So that's what Paul is asking here. Is that what you're doing? Are you doing the very same thing? Verse 24 says, "For the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles through you, as it is written." This word name is onoma. It's 3686. And it means authority, character, honor. So now it says, for the character of God or the honor of God is blasphemed. This word blaspheme is 987. It means to revile, to hurt the reputation. It means to speak with impious irreverence concerning God himself, or what stands in some particular relation to him. It is from the Greek word 989, which means to make sluggish, to make slow, to make stupid, to be abusive, or destroying one's good name. So now if we take some of those definitions, those words that could be placed in here for blasphemy, let's look and see what is being said. And for names, it says, for the character of God, or the honor of God, or let's just say God himself is made to look stupid among the nations because you have not kept his instructions. You've not followed the things that he's told you to follow. You've not done the things he's told you to do. When we look in our world today, and even during the election, let's just say the inauguration is a good example, and we saw young people burning cars and crashing windows, and on election night, you saw 18 and 20 and 25 and 40-year-old people sitting on benches on the sides of roads crying. Colleges shut down because these adults had to they had to bring Play-Doh and crayons and bring coloring books in to help them cope because they couldn't handle that Hillary Clinton had lost the election. And we watched these things take place, and then you have to, the question was asked, who raised these people? What kind of upbringing did they have? Let's bring that here. When you see the people of God that are supposed to be following the instructions of God, and they're walking around cheating on God, and they're stealing things from temples that don't belong to them and don't belong to him, and they're turning them into something that they're not intended to be used for, could we not ask the same question? What kind of upbringing do these people have? This is what Paul is asking right here. This is what Paul is saying right here. Let's make it, as one sister in Alabama would say, let's make it plain. What Paul is saying here is by you not following the instructions of God, you make God look stupid. Because God says, you're my people. I separated you. I set you apart. You're to follow he even says you're a treasure. You're the apple of my eye. I love you. And you say, yeah, but, and you do totally. That's not what it means to me. You do opposite of his instructions. Who ends up looking ignorant when a kid throws a tantrum at a store? We look at the kid and say somebody's to beat that kid, but who do we blame for the kid throwing the tantrum?
Parents.
The parent. So when God's people are in direct rebellion of Him and they're doing all this crazy, stupid stuff, who gets the blame? God. Let's just make it plain. God does. And that's what Paul's saying here. That's exactly what Paul is saying here. You bring his character down. You say, I'll just ask the question tonight. Is anything impossible with God? No. But when you go against his instructions, you bring that character down. Because then they got to ask the question, if nothing is impossible, then how come you're not doing what you're supposed to do? If we honestly believe that any minute God goes and you're dead, would we not be living a little bit better than we are today? If we really believe that at any moment your number's punched and you draw your last breath, would we not be living a little bit better than we are today? Absolutely. Absolutely. But when you're living in rebellion of Him, then pretty much you're saying, I've got tomorrow. I've got the next hour. And like Paul said, I do realize I am preaching to the choir when I'm saying these things, but this is where we're at. So we have to ask the same questions that Paul asked, because we all know that Paul started a new religion when he converted. So these are some of the questions you were asked if you wanted membership in the Paul's church. Verse 25. And if you want to look where Paul says, as it is written, it's written in Isaiah 52 and verse 5, where God says this same thing, that his name is blasphemed among the nations because of Israel. Isaiah 52 and 5 and Ezekiel 36 and 26. This is where Paul is pulling this from. Verse 25 says, for circumcision, very profiteth if thou keep the law, but if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. We all know what circumcision, the physical act, is. We all know that was a mark of the covenant for Israel. But on the flips, on the spiritual side, circumcision is the extinction of passions and the removal of spiritual impurity. So we are told that circumcision, we have a circumcision of the heart.
Which was also stated in the Old Testament several times.
Circumcision of the heart. Deuteronomy 10:16. He tells the people, circumcise your heart. Jeremiah 4 and 4, I believe he mentions again, circumcising your heart. But something else, Joshua 5 and 3. Here's how important this circumcision of your heart is. They've crossed the Jordan. They're fixing to go into the land. They're fixing to go fight to get into the land. And the first thing that Joshua does, in Joshua 5 and 3, is he realizes that some of the people have not been circumcised. And so everybody, before you get into the promised land, you have to be circumcised. That was what physically circumcision. You had to be part of the covenant. You had to bear the mark of the covenant to get into the land. But yet, churchianity says, not so. If they had to bear a mark of a covenant to get into the physical land, why would we think you don't have to bear a mark of the covenant to get into the spiritual promised land? It only makes sense. But he says, circumcision only benefits you if you keep. This word keep is Strong's word 4238. It means to practice, to do, to perform. It means to commit to. It's expressing an action as continued or not yet completed. What one does repeatedly, continually, and habitually. But he says, if you are a breaker of the law, your circumcision is made uncircumcision. This word breaker is a law, it means a lawbreaker. It comes from a root word that means to go past, or to overstep, or to neglect. Here again, it means to depart from, to leave, or to be turned from. So pretty much if you overstep the law, then what you thought got you in doesn't get you in. Well, there's people walking around today that think because I'm a particular denomination, I've got a key to the city, Paul, because I go to the big church on the hill. Ain't nobody going in but us. But Paul just said, if you are an overstepper of the law, if you're not a doer of this law, if you're not putting this into action, then you're not getting into, if you don't bear that mark of the covenant, you're not getting into the city. Now, please keep in mind also that you can't bear the mark of the covenant if you don't have the Spirit. Because if you don't have the Spirit, there is absolutely no way that you're getting into the city. The Spirit is what leads you and directs you into how to do these things. Yes, it leads you into all truth. And then he goes on, verse 26. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? So if those that are doing this that don't bear the physical mark, if they're keeping the righteousness of the law, then their uncircumcision will be for circumcision. And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee who by the letter and circumcision do transgress the law? Verse 28 says, for he is not a Jew which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. So we are told, if you keep the Sabbath, if you do those things, you are just trying to be a, have my little ones ever heard this? Jew? Trying to be a Jew.
But they're trying to get me to convert so that I can have their praises. I'd rather have God's praises.
Absolutely. They want you to cut that stuff out. Because if you will come over to their side, they quit looking at you cross-eyed.
It's all right by me, go ahead.
And then they'll pat you on the back. Oh, isn't he a good speaker? I love it when he preaches.
He's come to the fullness of understanding.
Yes, he's come to the fullness of understanding. He's got it right
In
now.
the new covenant.
That
The new
that poor ignorant bearded guy, his eyes were finally open. Now he's joined the church. Yes, sir.
One thing that really amazed me was when we were going through the Jesus movement.
Yes.
There was a church in that was started in Las Vegas, and it was bringing in all the people that were in the city of Sin City, and there was one group that was formed, and it was Prostitutes for Christ.
Prostitutes for Christ.
Yes, and they were out there in the streets
I've heard about
ministering to people, but they were